All learning with Zoom, aren't we?
Very true. Okay, I think we're live.
Are we live on Facebook or where are we
We're
live?
we're live on YouTube, so
Oh, okay.
great. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us this evening. We'll start off with
All learning with Zoom, aren't we?
oh, sorry, there. We'll start off with our land acknowledgement. So I'll share that on the screen so everybody can follow along here. We acknowledge that what we call Alberta is the traditional and ancestral territory of many peoples, presently subject to Treaty 6, 7, and 8, namely the Blackfoot Confederacy, Kainai, Piikani, Siksika, the Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Nakota Sioux, Stoney Nakoda, and the Tsuut'ina Nation, and the Métis people of Alberta. This includes the Métis settlements in the 6 regions of the Métis Nation of Alberta within the historical Northwest homeland. We acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who have lived in and cared for these lands for generations. We are grateful for the traditional knowledge keepers and elders who are still with us today and those who have gone before us. We make this acknowledgement as an act of reconciliation and gratitude to those whose territory we reside on or are visiting. So we'll just do quick introductions. So welcome, Geoff. Thank you for joining us. Shoun, Marlon, Randall, and I was asked to send some regrets along for a few people that couldn't make it. We're in tough times these days, difficult times. But Gyoke, Kathy, and Rebecca all said they wish that they could be here today, but they send their regrets and thank yous to Shoun to Geoff, pardon me, for doing the presentation today. Don't really have a lot of announcements ahead of time, so maybe we will just I'll turn it over to Shoun, Geoff, and thank you very much for joining us, and looking forward to your presentation. So.
Thank you. And let's use a lowercase p, because this will be mostly extemporaneous. I don't have a prepared speech. So, but I gave a Dharma talk last night, and that was very prepared. So, I'll be extemporaneous tonight.
Okay.
Just a quick word about me, and then we'll jump into the Zen Peacemakers part. I've my my first exposures to meditation and whatnot were late '60s, early '70s. I visited Zen Center of Los Angeles in 1975 and did an introductory day long visit there. But I didn't live in LA, so I couldn't maintain contact with ZCLA. I took Jukai at Shasta Abbey in California in 1978, and I've moved all over the place. Uh, I lived back at Zen Center LA in the 80s. One of my kids was born there. And then in San Diego, and when I was there, Maizumi Roshi was still alive, and I had the pleasure of practicing with him. I met the fellow who would become my teacher, Jerry Shishinwick Roshi. Now he was a senior student at the time. Um, Moved to San Diego, practiced with Joko Beck for a few years, and then we've been in Colorado for 22 years, and I've been practicing with Shishin Roshi here in the Boulder, Colorado area. And he's still I did Jukai again with him to reconnect with the White Plum lineage. So that's quickly my background. That's where I come from. I'm a senior student and vice president at a local Boulder Zen Center called EON Zen Center, that is an offshoot of Shishin Roshi's Great Mountain Zen Center. So I live in the mountains in between Boulder and Rocky Mountain National Park on Arapaho land, and sadly, there may be some people still here, but the Arapaho were dispersed in two directions, to a reservation in western Wyoming and to Oklahoma, which is, these are all tragic stories, aren't they? So talking about Zen Peacemakers, and I have to start with the three tenets, with the core, and I try never to use the word beliefs or philosophy. I had somebody ask me, this is more comedy, but I had somebody ask me last year, a younger student, so with practicing so many years, what has this done to your philosophy of life? And I said, well, I no longer have one. And I'm not sure she got it, but I wasn't trying to be smart aleck, but it's true. I don't have one. So anyway, the three tenets really form the basis of everything we do. And before I talk about programs and people and organization, I just want to underscore this. The three tenets were expressed by Bernie Glassman, who is our founder, and I'll say a word about him in a minute, as being not knowing, bearing witness, and then taking action based on not knowing and bearing witness. And that's less than 20 words, but it is the basis of everything that we do. And I could probably talk for an hour about that, and I won't do that to you. But the not knowing part really is the mind of Zazen. It is emptiness and constant change. and literally not having the answer or a position. As we do engage Buddhism, and I'm speaking of Zen Peacemakers, we always want to come from that place of not stepping in with an agenda or a position, a fixed position. Now, maybe I'll say more about that later, because it comes up for us a lot. We're asked by organizations around the world to join a cause or to take a position, and we get into hot water every once in a while because we don't do that. That's not what we do. Bearing witness really is looking at the world, no matter what we see, and being willing not to turn away. And again, I'll say more about this when we talk about Auschwitz. And then taking action. And the taking action is fraught. It's really a challenge because we really, as a practice, we need to come from those positions of not knowing and of just looking and seeing what's going on without having ideas or beliefs or objectives necessarily. So this is really action from the heart. And sometimes not taking action is what we do. You really can't predict what that's going to be. It's not how the heart works, I don't think. I don't think it telegraphs, and it's certainly not consistent. So from those three tenets, I'll do this like we do in the morning. The Zen Peacemaker Vows. I vow to plunge into not knowing, the source of all manifestations, and to see all manifestations as the teachings of not knowing. I vow to bear witness, to encounter each creation with respect and dignity, and to be touched by the joys and the pain of the universe. And I invite all hungry spirits into the mandala of my practice. And I commit my energy and my love to the healing of myself, the earth, humanity, and all creations. So we are committed to, in whatever action we do take, and in our organization, a lot of people are taking a lot of action, never losing sight of that. It's always meditation first. We had, I was charmed. I crashed your board meeting. I ran a board meeting this morning, and we're a reasonable sized organization, but we always start with silence, and then we always start personally with sharing. So meditation is always there. So let me kind of step back a little bit here. Bernie Glassman, you've undoubtedly heard of. His book, Bearing Witness, will tell you everything that I'm going to tell you here, and it's outstanding. I've read it several times, and it really is kind of the origin story a bit of Zen Peacemakers. He was the first successor of Hakuyu Taizan Maizumi Roshi at the Zen Center of Los Angeles. And that lineage now is called White Plama Sangha. And Maizumi Roshi had 12 successors. In that line now, there are well over 100. It's extraordinary. And, the influence this one man had on American Buddhism, on American Zen. Bernie was very, very traditional. Bernie was I met him back in the 80s, and stern and very committed to hard practice in the traditional Japanese way. I mean, he really was a font of information about everything that we did. But a point came, he moved to New York, he moved back to New York. He's from Brooklyn. And by the way, he died in fall of 2018. And ultimately disrobed. He had profound experiences of unity, diversity, and the harmony of unity and diversity, and of the hungry spirits that we refer to in this vow. Of all of those souls who are either physically or emotionally or spiritually longing and lost. And he vowed to feed them, the hungry spirits. Not literally a meal. Coincidentally, that is how it started. But to attend to them and to care for them, and to not exclude anyone. This will come up again here in a few minutes, and I'll expand a bit on that. Bernie and some other folks did basically a street retreat in Washington, D.C. early on, and then 40 years ago this year founded Grayston Bakery in Yonkers, New York. And Grayston was, first off, it was audacious. It was a poor place. There were lots of people who had drug problems or were involved with the criminal justice system. Poverty was rampant, and they just steamrolled in and met who they needed to meet, and cozied with the city and the state and every agency they could in order to start a business that could employ people in Yonkers. They quickly, and I'll keep this rather brief, but they quickly discovered, well, that's fine for someone to have a job and we can give them skills, but they don't have any place to live. Okay, let's renovate apartments. Let's teach people to be carpenters and plumbers and so forth. That's great, but a lot of the women can't work because they don't have daycare. Let's start a daycare. So it grew and grew and grew, and from day one, their philosophy at Grayston was, we don't do an application interview process. If you want to work here, you're hired. You might be a felon, you might be a junkie, you might be running from the police, you might be whatever it is. You have a place. Audacious thing. Joe Kenner, the CEO of Grayston now, we're still friendly with Grayston, but it's not we're not joined with them. They are a independent business and a nonprofit foundation. But if you talk to Joe, that is, they make brownies. Yes, they make some of the best brownies I've ever had, but their real work is doing what that original intention was, is, and they have a term for it that I've slipped my mind right now, but unrestricted hiring policy. And they're exporting this to other businesses too. They're having a profound effect on social action and social, Zen entrepreneurship. So let's see, how to kind of move this ahead without telling a whole story. So, Bernie's approach to things was very bold and big, and he grew an organization, and it's had different names over the years. Zen Community of New York was one of the names for a while, and was incorporated as such, and had lots of influence, and attracted a lot of students and then successors. Bernie has a whole list of successors himself. 26 years ago, Bernie's family had connections to Auschwitz during and before the war. So there was a personal aspect to that, and he, and if you read Bearing Witness, you'll get firsthand from him. Endeavored to do a retreat at Auschwitz. And 26 years later, we're still doing it every year. Even last year, we had to go online last year. We had 150 people online for a week. It was extraordinary. And as you'll read, or if you already have read, the audacious aspect of this was his approach was not to leave anybody out. This was not liberal American Zen people going to this site of one of the biggest atrocities in the history of humankind and feeling sad or powerfully somehow, and then leaving. From the beginning, his goal was to include survivors, families, victims, as well as perpetrators. And to this day, when we do these events, that remains a challenge for us organizing. With the Auschwitz event, which is 5 days at the camps, and we stay at a place called the Dialogue Center in Oswiecim, rather Spartan. So it's like a Sesshin week in a lot of ways. Up early, simple meals, outdoors all day long, cold, rainy, and lots and lots of meditation and lots of counsel, which I'll talk about in a bit. But the commitment to include literally either living German soldiers or Nazis, or their progeny, was extraordinary. And that remains the commitment. As people pass, it gets more challenging to do that. These in-person bearing witness retreats are one of the core practices. I'll call it a practice that we offer. And over the years, we've done all of those in Auschwitz. For a couple of handfuls of years, we've done a summer week-long retreat with Lakota elders up in South Dakota or Wyoming. Because of one of our teachers, Roshi Grover Genro Gaunt, something you may know of Genro, who has had connections with the Lakota for 25 years or more. We have good connections there, and again, we're really endeavoring to not go there as liberal white Zen tourists, but to really listen and to really bear witness and understand what goes on the reservations. This last year, this last July, we were able to go back in person. We had to be virtual in 2020. And one of our goals was to expand and connect with more tribes. So through our friends, the Lakota Elder Friends, we reached out and we were invited to a medicine wheel ceremony in the Bighorn Mountains in Wyoming, up at 10,000 feet, with Crow people, Southern Cheyenne, Arapahoes, and Lakota, about 70 Native people, and we met some extraordinary people. Arvil Looking Horse is someone you may have heard the name of over the years. That continues. In the past, we've done bearing witness retreats in Rwanda, in Bosnia, in Belfast, and some other places. Last year was tough. We had to do we had to do 3 retreats virtually, but we learned a lot, and we managed to find a way to have them be their own thing rather than a poor substitute for. We wanted to take advantage of, well, what does this medium offer that perhaps is better? Well, one thing that it offered last year was way more people could attend, both because it was much cheaper, you don't sleep on the ground, you don't have to pay travel costs, and you can stay in your home. So we had been working on the bearing witness opportunity for U.S. Americans. I try to use the word American as broadly for both these big continents, but for U.S. Americans, and that is the Black American experience here over what is now 402 or 403 years. Obvious. It's just right. It's right in front of us, and we did that online last year. And I won't take time talking about what we did last year. We're in the planning process to do this in person in May of this year. You'll see announcements coming soon in the newsletter. Hopefully everybody's subscribed to the newsletter. May 7th through the 11th, and we're going to Alabama. And we'll begin in Birmingham for a night and a day, Selma for a night and a day, and Montgomery for 2 nights and 2 days. We have connections with Brian Stevenson's Equal Justice Initiative in Montgomery, and it's called the Peace and Justice Museum. I think that's the official name. It is colloquially known as the Lynching Museum, and I'm sure you've seen pictures of the hanging slabs with names on them for lynchings throughout U.S. history. We're looking for local connections with Black churches and civil rights groups and so forth in the area. That's one of the kind of activities that we do. Let me back up one more time here and kind of describe the organization. I hope, Ryugen, I hope this is somewhat of what you're looking for me to do. We're about 3,500 members in, 40 countries or something like that. We're international. We have, and thanks to you all for joining as an affiliate. We are very close to and probably will have 50 affiliates here within the month. Those affiliates are, local Zen centers. Zen Center of LA is an affiliate, for instance, and as is Upaya and Village Zendo in Greenwich Village. But sometimes there are other kinds of organizations. We had my friend Trent, who is the executive director of San Francisco Night Ministries, which is a interfaith group, Christian and Buddhist, that goes out onto the streets of San Francisco just to be with people who are homeless. They're becoming an affiliate. That's kind of the look of the organization in terms of its size. We're a 501c3 in the U.S., a nonprofit. We have a board of directors, and we try to be very organized that way. So among the other things that we do, I mentioned the Bearing Witness retreats. We do street retreats, which is a different kind of a thing. We're doing one in San Francisco. I should remember the days. It's about 4 or 5 days over the Easter weekend. And street retreats are, and you've probably read about this or seen it online if you're on, in the Buddhist postings on the internet. But a group of people putting themselves on the street with no money, no identification, no cell phone, no tether, other than that they remain together, no place to sleep and nothing to eat. And it could be for 2 or 3 days, a weekend. Shoun Burns from Breadloaf Mountain Zen Center in Vermont just did a street retreat with a group of people in San Francisco, and I think they were out for 10 days. So having that experience of what that's like, and we've been doing street retreats for a few decades. Online, and I came in just about 2 years ago, and when I was interviewed, nobody told me about COVID because we didn't know yet. So my predecessor handed me the keys and taught me everything that he knew, and here's how this works, and here's how you pull off this, that, and the other thing, and then boom, it all changed. One of the things I wanted to do right away was to dramatically increase the frequency and the quality of what we offer online, because everybody's stuck in their home. We didn't have a meditation period that was ours that we did. That's probably the first thing that I did. So I started a weekday meditation group that's now been running for 2 years, and you're welcome to join if you ever like. Look in the newsletter and you'll see the link. It's at are you in the Mountain Time Zone? You are, aren't you? Yeah. So it's 9 o'clock Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday morning for half an hour. It's very informal. I keep it Buddhist light. I don't wear robes, and and it's just a I don't even call it Zazen. I call it a meditation period. And there's this wonderful community of people, most of whom have never been in the same room with one another ever. A few of us met at the Native American event last July for the first time, and it was really cool. We've been together for a year and a half, and oh, it's you. It was really nice. But 2 years ago, we had a monthly members meeting that we did, and I asked my predecessor, and he said, it's mostly organizational. If people have questions, maybe you can talk about what affiliates are doing and things like that. And I did it once, and I bored myself senseless. And I'm not easily bored, but I bored me. And I thought, I'm not doing this way any longer. We're going to get people to come and be guests who are interesting. And we've done exactly that. We have something that we offer almost every week. Sometimes through the holidays, we skipped a couple of weeks, but it's been just a wonderful array of friends of Zen Peacemakers who have come and they're willing to perhaps talk for 20 or 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and then take questions. Norman Fisher was a guest. Roshi Egyoku Nakao from Zen Center of LA was a guest. We've had poets and writers. Mark your calendar, by the way, too. And nobody else knows this yet. We next Thursday at noon our time, and this is publicized, Krishna Das will be our guest. Now that alone was nice. That was a win. Like, oh, I'm so happy you agreed to do this. 2 hours ago, because I had asked him, 2 hours ago, Jeff Bridges confirmed that he'll be willing to be the host because they know each other from 20 plus years ago. So nobody, Nobody else knows this. This literally just happened. So um, sign up. Come on in for that one. We've just had a wonderful group of guests over time. You know, Dharma teachers, social activists, um, organizations that are helping people from the arts, um, and that's what I'm really committed to doing is to keep it interesting. And that's about an hour and a half format. We have a shorter format we do on Facebook Live. That's about 30 minutes. We call it Peacemaker Chat, and it's me and a guest just doing that. We're working without a net, as they say. No script. We don't even share topics ahead of time. We just open up and say, okay, and I ask questions and we go back and forth. Um, the other main practice here, and I want to make sure I leave time for questions here. Am I okay so far? Um, the other main practice is counsel, and again, I think maybe about 25 years ago, Bernie and maybe Genro or Fleet Mall connected with Joan Halifax, who had a bit of history and experience with counsel practice, as I understand, as it came to us perhaps from the Iroquois, and going back to what even political organization that was part of Iroquois culture that it actually informed the founding of the United States. Um, uh, Fast forward, and some of that influence moved off in its own direction, and the Center for Counsel in California continues training counsel facilitators to this day. Jared Seid and his organization do a wonderful job of this, and they take counsel practice into prisons and the police force, military, places that you might think this is interesting for people to be able to open up this way. So we offer counsel usually once a week, and I don't know if I should go too far into describing what it is, but generally speaking, it's a small group, less than 15 people, coming together for an hour and a half intentionally, ritually, truly. I mean, we really, even though if somebody's done counsel 50 times, we still go through our agreements at the beginning. Those being, we speak from the heart. This is not an intellectual exercise. It's not polemic. We're not trying to convince anybody of anything. We're trying to say what's going on in here as nakedly as we can. We're spontaneous, so when it's our turn to speak, we've not planned what we're going to say, because the third agreement is we were fully listening from the heart while the other people were speaking. We're confidential. We don't crosstalk, and a few things like that. So counsel is an extraordinary practice, and in some ways really embodies those three tenets that I spoke about in the beginning. Taking action is when it's your turn to talk. And what am I going to say? Gosh, I should have written something down. I should have planned something clever so they won't think I'm a moron. No, that's not it. We come from emptiness. We come from not knowing. And it's a wonderful and frankly really challenging thing to do, to know that they're going to pass me the talking stick and I have not a clue what's going to come out of my mouth. It's a bit like Doksan too, if you really dive into Doksan that way. So counsel practice. Among kind of the big buckets of our activity include the things that I've talked about, but also a lot of direct helping. We have people feeding others. or working on housing, or at the border, um, or in prisons, um, and many creative things like this. You fellows, as I'm not sure who else might be watching it. I shouldn't say fellows, but your group can really take. I really like to encourage affiliates, especially if you're new, to look at what some of the other ones are doing, because there's some great ideas of what people are doing. And Joshin Burns in Vermont is a great example because he's in a rural area and a vigorous but rural sangha, and what they do is extraordinary. I mean, they have a food truck and they have people. It's almost a hospice kind of situation in the Zen Center. And then Zen Entrepreneurship, and this really came from the early days with Grayston. We have one of our early members, Ken Biel and Roshi, in Staten Island, who is the CEO of a charter school organization in Staten Island that's just really successful, working with at-risk kids, and it's a model that they're looking to really help others replicate elsewhere. I should probably wrap here in just a second. Two other things before I do that. Bernie did leave us back in 2018, and the organization, for better or for worse, I mean, it turned into this extraordinary thing, but it was very much dependent on him, as a lot of founder-based organizations are. Zen centers in general have this as a characteristic oftentimes, and he didn't. It wasn't his forte necessarily to have a succession plan and to make sure that operationally everything was all buttoned up and tidy. So it wasn't. So that's what we've been working on. Zen Peacemakers International was really reformed with a new board and kind of a new direction about 5 years ago when Bernie got sick. And our goal really is to never lose sight of what he left us, but not have us be dependent on him, and to move more to being mission-based. So that characterizes what we're doing now, and I feel pretty good we're moving in that direction. The last thing I want to mention is you'll hear, from time to time, you'll hear reference to Zen Peacemaker Order. And I think a lot of people are confused about what these two things are. Zen Peacemakers International is the nonprofit, the larger international umbrella organization. Zen Peacemaker Order is something that has been referred to for 30, maybe even 40 years. But it was never really solidified. There are a lot of people who were transmitted in this order or invited into this order. So there's been a bit of a confusion. We've spent the last year clarifying this. And now Zen Peacemaker Order is about 102 people, which includes as many of the veterans and teachers from over the years. For instance, Joan Halifax is a good example. Eve Marco is a good example. Fleet Mall is a good example. Teachers, other veterans who have been part of this organization and have participated in the activities, the practices. And we started essentially a school with a 2-year training program, and we have 36 students in this cohort that are now about 7 months into the first year. And it's I'd love to say it's wildly successful, but I don't know what the metrics of that would be, other than nobody's quit, everybody's enthusiastic, and we do a new module, a new topical module, every 2 months, and so within those 8 weeks, we meet 5 times, and then there's 3 Fridays we intersperse and don't meet so people can and some of those, one of them is a council, one of them is a peer group meeting, and then usually 3 of them are presentations, or I hate to say the word lecture because it's really not that way, but presentations on the topic, and so we're moving forward to that. And in fact, we're meeting next week to talk about planning year 2 because we haven't done that yet. So, and ZPO exists under the umbrella of ZPI and under its auspices. It's not separately incorporated, and it's under the governance of me, staff, and the board. And I'm also on the 5-person committee that runs the ZPO training. Okay. As far as being extemporaneous, I think I just ran out of gas. I hope that gives you something of what you were looking for.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you, Shoun, very much for the talk. Maybe we'll open it up to some questions if you're open to that.
Absolutely, yeah. I prefer that.
All right.
I'll
And if
jump
you don't
in
have any,
here.
that's okay too.
Thank you, Shoun, for your inspirational talk. I actually just finished Bernie Glassman's book, Introduction to the Cook.
Oh, good.
It wasn't what I thought it was. I thought it was going to be a thing about Dogen, which it was a little bit, but it was very inspirational. But actually, one of the questions I had is about that council component, because that's always been the and for me when it comes to this, as I'm learning, is the meditation, bearing witness, and especially living in society as middle-aged white male. Where is that place for me to be? Bearing witness, I think, is very important, especially for a lot of the challenges. But that council component, I'm just curious about, is that still a place for someone maybe like me to be, so to speak?
Absolutely. There's no prerequisite to doing it. It's open to everybody. If you go, I'm leading one here within a week or two for ZPI. I don't recall the date. It's in the 20s somewhere. But if you're interested in joining it, and I could look it up if you want to know, but it's on the website. And if you want to register and come in, it's wide open. It's free. It takes some of your time, and you don't need to know anything when you come in, because we go through the guidelines, and basically, Shoun, the format is, I'll open with the guidelines. We do an invocation. We bring somebody or some energy in with us. I even have my candle. We can't sit around a campfire as we would normally do, so we light a candle and sort of imagine that that's what we're doing. And then we step in together, and once we've lit the candle and intentionally entered this space, this liminal space, we're in ritual space. Usually we'll go around the circle one time and just have everyone check in for a minute or two. Sometimes a facilitator will say, give us a couple words just on your emotional weather report right now, or something like that. And then we'll go around again with a longer period of time for each person, perhaps 8 minutes or something like that, 6 or 8 minutes, depending on how many people there are. And then if time allows, we might do a short one at the very end. Let me, since you asked, and I'd love to have you come in, it'd be great. And I love doing it, both as a participant and as a facilitator. I gave a talk last night about lineage, and to my local Zen center, and I pulled in something from that we refer to, and I'll try to be brief with this, from council. When we're sitting in that circle around the fire, we can see each other. We're looking at one another, but we're always looking at the fire, and we call it the children's fire. And uh, we um, we feel or we imagine that behind me are my mom and dad and their parents behind them. And for those math people here, we know that this multiplies exponentially. And part of what I mentioned in the talk is um, it doesn't take very many generations back there before there's 1,000 people behind me whose lives and the actions they took in their lives led to me being right here, right now. And then looking into the fire, so there's kind of this funnel of time and people behind me. And then there's another funnel that goes forward into the fire. And I have 3 kids, and I have 3 grandkids, and there is a future there. And it goes forward. And here I sit at this Venturi point in between all these generations in this lineage. And I'm alive in this lineage right now with this responsibility to not know, to bear witness, and to do something good. So that's kind of the spirit of council. That helps.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. I'll see if I can find it. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Good, good. Love to see you there. Yeah. Anybody else? I'll answer anything.
I'm just curious. The exercises, bearing witness. Obviously, Bernie Glassman had a personal connection to Auschwitz, and so it made sense there for him to do that. But the indigenous people thing, I guess my question is, how does a Zen order reach into these communities that may not have any desire or knowledge of Zen and be willing to partner with the organization and conduct these exercises? How do you go about building those connections?
Terrific question. And I wasn't here 26 years ago, so I don't know how that occurred then. There are a lot of Jewish people in North American Zen and European Zen. So I think there were some natural constituencies there, but those early groups included Gypsies and Catholics and descendants of intellectuals who had been victimized. Roshi Genro, as I mentioned, with the Lakota people, had friends and connections going back a long time, just from a personal basis. So I think it was helpful. That was helpful, but Marlon, I got to tell you, it's really delicate because of privilege, because of white supremacy, because of the horrible history of genocide and of broken promises, and the elder people that we work with and we know we're very close with. We know their kids, we know their families, but I think that's taken time, and I guess I can speak kind of personally about this because, frankly, I started in 2020 on February 2nd. And I think it was the end of that week or the end of the next week, I drove to Rapid City in South Dakota to have a meeting with our folks and the elders and for a weekend. So they didn't know me from anybody. And I had to think about it. I didn't want to come roaring in as the new ED with power and decision making and the budget and we're going to do this and we're not going to do that. I really, really needed to listen. And and realized this group had a history that's deep, old friendships, and it's so touching and wonderful the way that the group knew to work together, and especially as it relates to the clock. Let's meet at 8 a.m. 9:05. I have an agenda here. Can we get to item number 1? No, he's gonna finish telling that story, and it just it was such a wonderful self-encounter of my tendencies to come face to face with a real different way of being together in community, and it's beautiful. So I don't know if I can answer your question other than it takes time, it takes trust, it takes patience, it takes 2 ears and 1 heart, and probably not much from your mouth. And we have this event once a year. We have some planning meetings that lead up to it. But we, over here on my other screen, I'm pointing it as if you could see this. It's funny how comfortable we get with Zoom, isn't it? We have, several WhatsApp groups with all these people who have ever done these retreats, and people are talking to each other all the time. We were going to have a meeting today to begin planning this summer, and Manny and Renee, 2 of the elders, their grandkids got COVID. So everybody knows, everybody in the whole group knows this already, and all this love is flowing around, and, let us know if we can do anything, and, prayers for your grandkids and so forth, and don't worry about it, we'll reschedule this. So it's really turned into a living community that way. More immediately, we have a hard stop at 1:15, don't we? We're trying to build this event in Alabama. And we are all, there's 4 of us on the planning group, and 2 of us have been down, to do scouting and whatnot, and a couple other people will go down again. But we're just really sensitized to, 50 plus years ago, white American students came down and joined the Freedom Riders and took that risk and worked side by side. I think that that was beautiful. That was a beautiful example of partnership rather than coming to tell you, here's how you should do this. So we're really sensitized as far as wanting to be low key, wanting to find local partners who we can begin to create these relationships. But we're literally right on the doorstep of this, so it's a bit raw. And hopefully we can look back in 10 years and say, gosh, we have these intimate relationships with a church in Selma or the civil rights group, in Birmingham. Just quickly about that, we did this Race in America plunge last year virtually, and I met a fellow who is a sensei and a teacher at an HBCU, a historic black college and university, part of the HBCU system, in Volusia County, Florida, between Daytona Beach and Orlando. And he was part of we started talking, and he said, and I told him what we wanted to do, and he said, well, I'm part of this local group of clerics, academics, and local black activists. And we are finding the sites of lynchings in our county and documenting them. EJI is really rigid about the historic documentation of these sites. But then these local groups do a ceremony where they collect soil from the site and then take it to Montgomery, and one of the slabs is dedicated. So long story short, we had a number of different elements of our program online last year, but one of them was they were all in person in Florida, this large group, probably 3/4 black people, and then some clerics and academics doing this ceremony. And it was so moving. It was unbelievable because they collected the soil on site and then did what they called a water ceremony dedication for this soil, and talks and whatnot. So that's a long, perhaps, Marlon, a long non-answer to your question, but I don't really know the answer. So join us and help us find out. Yeah.
Great. Well, I think that's time for us. So I just want to thank you, Shoun, for your wonderful presentation. It's very much appreciated. Thanks for taking the time. Just for everybody here and anybody that may be watching, we one of the things that we don't have a lot of overhead in that, but we do have some expenses. So definitely encourage you, if you want to buy us a cup of coffee or check us out on PayPal, check on the Rocky Mountains website. There's ways to support. One of the things we like to do is we like to provide dana to those that provide presentations or talks, and so if you feel so inclined, please feel free to do that. And definitely, if you haven't yet, subscribe to Zen Peacemakers, the newsletter. And it's we're looking forward to moving ahead and getting to know you better and getting to grow the circle larger. So,
Good.
Really appreciate you taking the time tonight. So,
Wonderful.
would you be willing to close us off maybe with the Zen Peacemaker Vows? Is that?
You want to hear those? Should do
Sure.
those again? Yes.
Just the closing, maybe. Yeah. Or something else if you feel something more appropriate to close.
I vow to plunge into not knowing, the source of all manifestations, and to see all manifestations as the teachings of not knowing. I vow to bear witness, to encounter each creation with respect and dignity, and to be touched by both the joys and the pain of the universe. I invite all hungry spirits into the mandala of my practice, and I commit my energy and my love to the healing of myself, the earth, humanity, and all creations.